Yeah, what's up? I'm back once again with the Final Fantasy VII Remake stuff, and there are going to be spoilers everywhere all over this thing because I am a bad boy. Run it. Okay, so in my last two videos, I've pretty much been singing the praises of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, I am dry humping the game by this point, and I'm not even sorry either, by the way. I love it. I love it very much. I even have props for the ending, which shocked some of you, but no, for real. I'm down with the ending. I'm down for it. I'm in this for the long haul. That's how much I love FF7 Remake. But just because I love something doesn't mean I'm loving it blindly either. I believe in a fair balance, so for all the love I have towards this game, there were a number of things I disliked or I felt could have been done better, and that's the point of this video, to document those things that I didn't like. I just felt that I needed to declare all this first before I begin, you know. I don't want my complaints to drown out the love I have for this game. I don't want people getting it twisted. If you're new around here and this is the first video you're watching, you might end up thinking that I hate FF7 Remake, and that couldn't be further from the truth, trust me. So I just wanted to get all that straight first. Right then, these complaints are going to be a mixed bunch, from things that are severely frustrating right to the nittiest, pickiest of insignificant complaints. I'm probably going to get a little ranty too. All that being said and done, here I go. Let's start with this one. Barrett's sunglasses. Yeah, get rid of them. I'm not sure why Square felt the need to add sunglasses to his design anyway, because Barrett looks like a badass by default, so adding shades was unneeded. And he also emotes way better with them off because he has really expressive eyes. It's just a shame they're hidden away behind the shades for 80% of the game. I'm glad Square had the foresight to take them off his face at some points, especially during the Sector 7 plate incident, because Barrett in that chapter was phenomenal, and having him hide behind a pair of sunglasses during all of that would have been dumb, so I'm glad Square took his shades off during that part of the story. Now hopefully they'll take the shades off of him permanently in the next game. He really doesn't need them. There was way too much noise from unnecessary NPCs. Now, while I appreciate how these NPCs flesh out the city of Midgar from a presentation aspect, from a gameplay aspect, having all these unimportant NPCs firing off dialogue whenever I go near them is ridiculously distracting. Now, I'm trying to listen to what a party member is saying to me while I walk through a crowded area, and I can't focus on them because I've got 50 wastemen around me all talking at the same bloody time.
It was chaotic.
Sorry for dragging you into all this. It was wrong of me to put you in danger like that. I promise I won't do it again.
Danger's part of the job.
And this is made even more distracting when you have a separate side window dedicated to subtitling the NPC dialogue too. I mean, you can disable the side window in the options menu, which was appreciated, but you couldn't do anything about the NPC audio levels. Like, there's one part where you're on a crowded train and you need to talk to an important NPC, right? And the amount of distractions that were going off in there made it almost unbearable. I couldn't focus at all.
Little help, Cloud, please?
I'm sure
I can't stop thinking about it.
Too.
The bomb I made shouldn't have produced an explosion that big.
Shut your fucking mouth!
I think Square could have implemented a system in the game where if your current player character is in active conversation with another character, or when a more important NPC is trying to get your attention in a crowded area, the useless background chatter should automatically dip to a very low audio level. Nobody needs to be distracted this much when playing an RPG. I get the reason why Square did it in this way. They wanted to make Midgar feel lived in, and the city definitely has that vibe, but at some point it was happening at the cost of my own concentration. On that note, I feel that for as much as they fleshed out Midgar, we have once again missed out on seeing more of the city. Yes, they expanded upon sections that were in the original game, and those areas are much larger in the remake, which was awesome and I appreciated it. But I don't know, I guess I was expecting to visit places I hadn't visited yet. Like, for example, during Chapter 4 when you go to the Sector 7 upper plate and walk around the housing district, I loved that moment. I had never seen this side of Midgar before. I spent so much time exploring this small little section, even if there wasn't much to it. The fact that it was new and it expanded upon what the different communities were like in this city, that's what captivated me. I just kinda wish we had 1 or 2 more newer areas like this. I mean, have we ever been to sectors 2 or 3 before? I don't think we have. What's in those sectors? What does the rich side look like? What does the poor side look like? Later on in the game, instead of making us trek through the sewers a second time, I think it might have been more interesting to give us another newer unvisited section to check out instead. Granted, this would have been more costly and time consuming for Square to build another part of Midgar, but I'm not even talking about making it a full hub world section like Sector 7 or Sector 5, no, just a small new area to visit or pass through, nothing over the top or insane. Just give us a little more of Midgar. Final Fantasy VII Remake is not meant to be seen as an open world game, so I'm not labelling it as such, but for a city like Midgar that has so much to show, it feels like we could have seen more of it than we actually did. Jukeboxes felt underutilized, and by extension, I think having something like a safe house feature was also a missed opportunity in this game. All the extra CD music you find can only be played on jukeboxes, and jukeboxes can only be found in certain locations during certain chapters. As a result, I never found the right moment to hang back and enjoy this bonus music because the game is constantly pushing me forward. I kinda wish the party had a set safe house that they could access at any time, like a spot that you can travel to and just chill out, play the minigames, listen to music on the jukebox, talk to your current party members at your own leisure, you know, something like that. A spot where the story is not pushing you forward, you just go to the safe house and it's your own little pad that gives you space to breathe. Like the fact that you could only play darts at 7th Heaven meant that once the upper plate had dropped, that was it. You ain't playing darts again unless you revisit Chapter 3 specifically. I know safe houses are more suited to an open world sandbox game, which is not what FF7 Remake is, but still, you know, I think the inclusion of some sort of safe house feature that contained the minigames and the jukeboxes would have been a nice additional feature to have regardless. And speaking of safe houses, it's a bloody crime that we didn't get to see Avalanche's HQ in the 7th Heaven basement. I'm not sure why they didn't include it. It's not like it was a huge location either. I doubt it would have taxed on resources, but whatever, shame. It's a shame we didn't get to see the basement. On the subject of Avalanche, I kinda wish Biggs, Jesse and Wedge would have been non-player party members for a short time during the early chapters, in a similar way that Red 13 was towards the end of the game. You kinda get moments like this during Chapter 4 when you're racing along together on the motorbikes, or when Wedge and Biggs briefly assist you during the raid on the Shinra warehouse. But I think it would have been nice to have a few moments where during combat you actively had them right next to you, firing off shots and throwing you a potion if your health was low, or something to that degree. I'm definitely not saying the whole game needed to have them as non-player party members the entire time. I'm just saying one or two more moments where they fought alongside you would have been nice. Speaking of combat, if you've watched other people critique this game, then you've probably already heard this complaint a million times by now, but I'm gonna jump on the wagon with it anyway. Dealing with airborne enemies is not fun. Your options are shockingly limited, which is bizarre considering the rest of the combat in this game is so broad with the choices you can make. Barrett and Aerith work long range, so they're more suited to dealing with airborne enemies, but if they're incapacitated, or worse yet, not in the party at all at that point in time, then you're kinda left fumbling around with Cloud and Tifa, and jumping up to deliver a few quick strikes before falling back to the ground gets very tiresome. Also, the camera would take a massive shit when either Cloud or Tifa jumped up and there was a wall or ceiling nearby. In any case, aerial combat is definitely something that they need to figure out better for the next game. At certain points, not being allowed to walk in one direction because the story requires me to head towards another is understandable but also quite annoying. FF7 Remake is weird in that sense because on one hand, it feels like it wants to be an open world game. It wants to give me the city of Midgar to explore and enjoy whichever way I want, but then it suddenly remembers it's telling a story, so it stops me from exploring that world in favour of following the narrative. Whenever I was walking around and that warning symbol appeared, it threw me right out of the moment. Thankfully, it didn't happen too often for me, but when it did, it ruined my immersion. If we are teased with the possibility of exploration only to have our hands slapped for doing it, then I mean, what was the point? Either let us look around or don't, or find another way to restrict us from doing so until we are allowed to do so. Speaking of exploring, the map screen confused me sometimes. Like, was it just me, or did anybody else have trouble with the map and understanding the quest markers? Sometimes it felt like the markers on the map weren't directing me to where I was actually supposed to go. Like, if I received a quest, sometimes it felt like the markers were directing me back to the quest giver, rather than where the next objective for that quest was. It just felt like the map wasn't handling the markers in an efficient way, because I know on a few occasions I had to ignore the map entirely and just wing it until I found what I was looking for. But that being said, it could have just been me being dumb. Yeah, that's entirely possible. It could have just been me being dumb and I wasn't reading the map properly. Whatever. Chapter 6 wasn't that fun for me. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. At best it was tolerable, but I'm not filled with excitement whenever I have to revisit it. It was nice to hear about some of the lore surrounding this area, but aside from that, this chapter felt like a chore. Having to double back through a dull looking map to get some items, therefore extending my time spent in this location, was pretty annoying. Nothing happens with the storyline here either. It feels like there's no payoff or reward for completing this chapter, and as a result this feels more like padding than anything else. Honestly, for as annoying as it is to run through the sewers a second time later on in the game, at least there were storyline moments regarding Leslie and Don Corneo during that part. But here in chapter 6, as we fumble around the Sector 5 underplate with nothing worthwhile happening in our entire time here, and nothing interesting to look at either, I'd say this felt like the most underwhelming section in the entire game. And on that note, if they haven't done so by the time this video goes out, Square, for the love of God, please patch the low res texture issues. Throughout the game there are moments when the textures that load are low res versions, when it's already been data mined by fans that high res versions of the same textures exist in the game files. Whatever's causing it, please fix the issue. It severely ruins a cinematic moment when the characters are talking about the scenery and the skybox is rendering a fuzzy pixelated mess. Materia in this game is wicked, but there's one feature missing from the original materia system that I wish they had included in the remake. In the original FF7, once you maxed out a materia's level, it spawns a copy of itself at a starting base level, allowing you to own more than one of the same materia and level the new one up from scratch. I understand why the remake doesn't have this feature, because we would essentially end up godmodding ourselves and break the game, but that should have been our choice as the player. That's what made the materia system in the original so fascinating, the experimentation to bust the game wide open if we so choose. In Remake, I feel Square wanted to try and keep the gameplay as balanced as possible, so things like blue materia are super rare now, and without the materia spawning feature, we are severely limited to the amount and variety of materia we can have. I understand Square's decision here, but I think perhaps they could have gone about it in a different way maybe. What if, say, after you completed the game once, the materia spawning feature is unlocked for future playthroughs? This way, it allows you to go through the game once on a balanced level and experience things as Square intended for us. Then, during the New Game Plus playthroughs, it gives you the option to experiment even further by allowing materia to spawn upon maxing out their levels. It would give players yet another incentive to play through the game again too. I just know I would have really appreciated having more than one copy of Magnify or Warding materia, and I would have totally gone through further playthroughs if it meant leveling up those materia granted me newer copies of them. So maybe in the next game, Square will reintroduce materia spawning again. That would be nice.
Candidate detected. Performing physical analysis. Sizable weapon, excellent cardiovascular health, and impressive lung capacity.
Shut the fuck up, you cunt!
Chadley. Yeah, I don't like Chadley. I'm not entirely sure why, to be honest with you. I haven't really sat down to think about it until now, until I started writing this script, but I realised that I don't like Chadley. Maybe it's the way he talks. Or maybe it's the way he dresses. Or maybe it's his paper-thin motive of being a member of Shinra but working from the inside to bring the company down. Or maybe it's a combination of all three of those things. It's probably a combination. I don't know, I just don't like him much. It seems like his concept and inclusion is incredibly weak when compared to everybody else that you meet in the game. I kinda wish that instead of having this character, we had another agent of Avalanche working inside Hojo's lab and giving us the materia-based missions instead. I mean, it's established later on that associates of Avalanche and Avalanche sympathizers have been working at Shinra for a long time, so why not have one of those agents be our contact for the materia missions instead? Maybe an old friend of Barrett or something, or another one of Mayor Domino's boys, you know? Just to flesh out the Avalanche lore further, it would have been much more interesting instead of this kid who doesn't fit with the rest of the tone that this game has. Let's see a show of hands. Who here likes the new theme song for Wall Market? I'm probably going to get blasted for this one, but yeah, the song was awesome for the first couple of loops. I was feeling it at first. Then after about 10 minutes, it started to get a little too repetitive. The main version of the song is only 2 minutes long, so it loops pretty regularly without offering much variation, and since a sizable chunk of the game is spent doing lengthy missions in Wall Market, that song ended up driving me up the bloody wall itself. It's the equivalent to Rufus's marching song in Junon from the original FF7. I'm fine with it for a few cycles, yeah? I'd even say I can enjoy it in small doses. But being subjected to the song for anything longer than a few minutes makes me want to punch myself in the ear. So yeah, big ups to Wall Market, and big ups to you if you love the song, but I'm sorry, that song was too much for me, bro. Eligor. The placement of this boss fight is terrible. In fact, if I'm being honest with you, this might actually be one of my biggest nitpicks of the entire game due to how much he ruins my mood. Let me explain why. Before you leave, let me explain. At this point in the story, the party have learned that Shinra are going to drop the Sector 7 plate onto the slums below, killing thousands of lives and framing our heroes for it. Tifa is anxiously worrying about this, so like the original FF7, in your attempts to stop Shinra, you first need to travel through the sewers and then through a train graveyard to reach the pillar that supports the Sector 7 plate. There's this sense of dread that simmers away in the background, and if you've played the original FF7, you know what's coming, and it's constantly in the back of your mind as you make your way through these two areas. Even if you haven't played the original, during the remake there are cutscenes showing Tifa who is constantly worrying about this situation, which only heightens the urgency of what's happening. All I could think about was getting to the pillar as quickly as possible. It was my only objective. But then as you exit the sewers and reach the train graveyard, the remake suddenly decides to introduce a brand new side story involving ghosts. Now, this side story is fairly harmless on its own. In fact, with the new insight that it gives to Aerith's childhood, I actually welcomed this new side story. I found it interesting and I appreciated it. Towards the end of this side story, you fight a brand new boss called Ghoul, who has an amazing new boss theme song, and I enjoyed it. After you defeat the boss, leave the arena and slowly start to exit the graveyard, in the horizon you catch a glimpse of something. An explosion. It's very far in the distance, but your eyes are not going to miss it. In a dark, dimly lit background, a red and yellow explosion will grab your attention. The game wants you to notice it. So I noticed it. And I realized what it was. It was the Sector 7 pillar. Shinra had already made their move, Avalanche had intercepted them, and now they were fighting each other at the pillar with helicopters hovering around it and fiery explosions going off. All the urgency I felt suddenly came rushing to a head. Now that I could visually see the incident taking place in real time, all I wanted to do was get there. I needed to reach that location. And because I've played the original FF7, all I could think about was Avalanche on that pillar, and what was about to come next. Nothing else mattered. I've battled a cool new boss, I've heard some cool new music, I was even treated to a nice new little side story. Thank you very much, I appreciate it all, and now I have to go. But no, for some reason, the game decides to continue the side story involving the ghosts. It sends you through more dungeon-based challenges before putting you into yet another boss fight. This time with a boss named Eligor, who is essentially the main antagonist for this side story. Now, to me, Eligor looks cool as hell. Like, design-wise, he looks sick. Okay? His whole story involving luring children into the graveyard to consume their souls is also pretty dark and quite intriguing. Plus, it's because of him that we got some insight into Aerith's lonely childhood, and trust me, I felt so bad for Aerith after learning about that stuff. For real. I appreciate what Eligor does in context for that side story. But the placement of this section absolutely derails the urgency towards the pillar incident, which is one of the most memorable time-sensitive moments in the original FF7. Like, this Eligor sub-story completely butts in. It gets in the way. In the distance, the pillar is constantly under attack, but I'm still having to sit here and move trains around. And I'm getting frustrated and annoyed because all I want to do is get to the bloody pillar and I can't. I'm still stuck in the graveyard. And then I have to fight Eligor, a boss battle after I just had a boss battle. Like, what the hell is going on with the pacing during this part of the game? Why did they need to include so many interruptions on the way to the pillar? Why is this game trying to distract me this much? And another thing, this whole end section at the graveyard makes Tifa look like a polarizing mess. 1 minute she's fretting and worrying about the pillar.
They're really gonna drop the plate. Please, please let us be in time.
And the next she's taking time out to be awestruck by some spirits flying away. Like, hey, hello, babes, the pillar is on fire. You said so yourself not even 10 seconds ago that you need to get moving. Your friends are going to die, Tifa. And yet there you are, wide-eyed in amazement at some sparkly lights. I'm sorry, nah, there's nothing good about this presentation. Nothing good at all, I'm sorry. I think Square wanted to instill a sense of pressure on the player by forcing Eligor in between you and the pillar, and I get what they were trying to do. But to me, the mood they wanted to set didn't land. They didn't execute it well at all. I didn't feel pressure, I felt annoyed. I felt a huge lapse in focus. And thanks to Tifa's sudden bewildering approach to an urgent situation, I no longer believed in the characters at all during this part of the story. The party were focused all throughout the sewers and for most of the graveyard, but as soon as Eligor shows up, all consistency with them goes right out the window, especially with Tifa. You don't throw in a massive boss that continues a side story that should have been wrapped up 15 minutes ago, because all you're doing now is distracting your characters from what's happening, and you're wrecking the flow of your narrative. And you're pissing me off in the process, let's not forget that. Eligor's boss fight placement is atrocious, and it's definitely one of my biggest complaints by far. Speaking of the Sector 7 play incident, as much as I utterly adore the soundtrack for this game, this song does not match the fear and utter helplessness of the plate dropping. People are literally being flattened by an entire man-made landmass, and Square's choice of accompanying audio is a repetitive rock guitar riff. Why? It's such a shame too, because everything leading up to the platefall was on point. The music was matching the emotions of the story beat for beat, and then it got lazy at the most significant moment. This was one of the moments where the original FF7 handled the mood much better. In the original, there was no music at all. You heard the plate give way and crush an entire community of people. You heard the screams of innocent lives being snuffed out by a maniacal president who was listening to classical music while he watched from the safety of his office. It was haunting to watch and very effective. For me, it was one of the most shocking moments in the original FF7. And the remake completely missed the mark during this scene. For some dumb reason, it went for strumming fast-paced guitars. Such a poor choice. I can't wait for FF7 Remake to release on PC so somebody can patch out the song during this cutscene. Somebody, please get rid of it. Please, thank you. You know what? I'm gonna say it's a bug. The music for this cutscene begins during a gameplay section, but I bet you the song was meant to change or fade out entirely when the cutscene started, but the game probably just fails to register this action. So I'm calling it a glitch. I'm gonna call this a glitch. It's probably not, but screw it, I'm saying it is. It's the only excuse I can give this part. For an OST that works in such unison with the cutscenes, I can't believe Square purposefully used this song for this precise moment in the game. It can't be intentional. The sewers, the second run for the sewers was a little dull, yeah. I don't think I hate it as much as everybody else does, but I definitely would have appreciated seeing something different. Something a little more visually pleasing would have been nice. As I said earlier, it would have been nice to see a different part of Midgard that we hadn't visited yet instead of retreading old ground, but whatever, the sewers are the sewers, so it is what it is. Let's talk about boss fights quickly. I love how epic the boss fights are and that we're treated to an in-game cinematic when a boss battle progresses into the next phase, but these awesome cutscenes come with an issue. Namely, if I've begun an attack just as the transition is about to take place, the damage I deal is nullified and to my understanding isn't carried over to the next phase. Which is really annoying because if I've just activated the limit break that I had been saving up, only to see it do no damage because a cutscene was being queued in, then I don't know, I'm being treated as a mug, aren't I? And I don't want to be mugged off, it's not needed. So for future titles in the remake series, please keep the awesome multi-stage boss fights. Please keep the mid-fight cutscenes because they are brilliant at raising tension within the fight itself. Just don't rob me of my attack if I've already selected it. Please, find another way to handle this if you can. This next one might seem weird to you at first, but hear me out, alright? It's another story moment that rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't like Wedge being included during the Shinra HQ part. I mean, I get it. Square wanted to show us that Wedge is this lovable, good-natured, kind soul who is defying fate with his acts of courage, and that's cool, I'm down for that, but in my honest opinion, Wedge already had this exact significant fate-defying moment during the Sector 7 plate incident. We didn't need to have another moment like this for him. Including him in this part of the story now raises more questions, and I don't feel that Square are going to answer these in any satisfactory way. The reasons I have issues with his inclusion are as follows. Firstly, Wedge was so busted up from the Sector 7 incident that he could hardly move, yet we're somehow meant to believe that he not only travelled all the way to the tower from Elmira's house in the slums, but he was also able to successfully infiltrate the tower alone, despite him being one of the least inconspicuous and able members of Avalanche. He's even in pain during the cutscenes, yeah? Wedge hasn't healed up at all, and considering how much of a task it was for our own party to climb the wall and infiltrate the tower, I find it difficult to believe that Wedge could have got into Domino's office inside Shinra HQ all by himself with the injuries he had. But okay, fine. I'll accept it. It requires me to suspend my belief for the sake of plot convenience, but sure. I'll take it that Wedge somehow made it to Shinra HQ either by himself or with the help of someone else. Fine. Whatever. The logic behind him being there is not the part that annoys me the most though. I might have accepted all of this had it not been for Wedge's final scene in the game, because his final scene is so jarring and poorly presented that it feels like this whole moment was thrown together at the last minute. It sticks out like a sore thumb in an otherwise beautifully presented and well-paced game. During our party's escape in the elevator, we suddenly get interrupted by this random scene of Wedge just fumbling around the hallways of Shinra HQ. Like he's just tiptoeing around and acting all goofy. What's he doing? Where is he going? Who knows? It's not made clear. Then, within a split second, he somehow manages to catch a glimpse of Barrett in the free-falling elevator, and then this happens.
Barrett! Not again! You can't stop me! For Biggs! For Jesse! Tifa! And Barrett too! I'm sorry, Cloud.
Just tell me that I made a difference.
What? What are you doing? Seriously, what the hell is this? Why? Why the hell is this? Why the hell is this here? Why did this happen? This scene, okay, this whole entire scene is awful. I'm not even sure which way to dissect it. It's just so terribly paced and awkwardly directed that I'm left scratching my head at its inclusion. The way I think I'm supposed to interpret this is that Square want to show us that Wedge knows something and he needs to inform Barrett of this information, hence the reason he calls out to him and he's trying to get his attention. But the Whispers don't want Wedge spilling whatever beans this is because it will disrupt the timeline, so to stop that from happening, they throw him through a window. With a fade to black, no less. And yo, are we really doing a fade to black death scene for Wedge? Because a fade to black death scene usually ends up becoming a fake out death, so now we're just pretending that Wedge is dead when we know he's probably fine and he's likely going to pop up again later on in the series. And if so, that's weak, because we've already had one moment in the game where Wedge was presumed dead only to turn up alive, so doing it a second time now starts to lose the impact. And if Wedge did actually die here, then that's weak as well, because this is a pathetic death scene to give Wedge. It shits all over the previous moment in the game when he was originally meant to have died. Either way, whether he's alive or dead now, this is crap. This is crap now. I don't like it. I don't like this at all. It feels like Square overutilized Wedge's purpose in this game, and that sucks because I like Wedge. He just didn't need to be here at Shinra HQ, and by putting him here, they've weakened his role because the direction they took with him was ridiculous in its presentation. The drum was too long. I appreciated spending some time in Hojo's lab and learning more about his experiments, but this dungeon definitely went on for way longer than it needed to. Rufus Shinra. I love Rufus. I think Rufus is brilliant and his new design is wicked. Aside from one small thing. I'm not a fan of all these new belts and clips. Nah, Rufus is meant to look like a smartly dressed corporate businessman, not some light gothic rock star. Like, his whole outfit is perfect. Yeah, the inclusion of the lilac in his design, beautiful, looks really nice. His whole outfit is perfect, aside from these belts. But whatever, you know what, I'll sit with it a little longer, okay? Who knows, maybe it will grow on me. Maybe these belts will grow on me. Like how they seemingly grew on Rufus for some reason. Speaking of weird design choices, how exactly did the Watchers of Fate go from spooky hooded floaty cloaks to whatever the hell this is? I'm not saying the representation of Destiny needed to be a giant floating cloak, because that would look dumb as hell, but I'm not a fan of how the Harbinger looks either. I mean, I get it, Square wanted to give these creatures the abstract vibe, but this feels too devoid of any qualities. They look uninteresting. I mean, they're manifested by the planet, right? The same planet that manifests the awesome weapons. I don't know, it might have been nice if the Whisper Harbinger had more aesthetical qualities that kept it in the same ballpark as the weapons, instead of looking like some murky, oily tree roots, or whatever the hell it is, for an end game level threat, especially one of such galactic proportions. It would have been nice if the Harbinger design had a little more imagination to it. And finally, there's one last thing I have to nitpick because it really annoyed me, though it wasn't from within the game itself. I want to file a complaint to the PR and marketing team for FF7 Remake because that final trailer you lot released was sabotage. How the hell can you cut a trailer that not only reveals major endgame characters, but also shows us massive story spoilers in the process? Like, what were you trying to achieve with that one? You probably should have included a spoiler warning at the start of your trailer for those of us who were avoiding spoilers. I'm serious. How the bloody hell are you going to show Barrett getting shanked by Sephiroth in a trailer? Are you for real? You're really going to put that out there? You want to purposely ruin the feeling of shock that people were going to receive in the game by including that moment in a trailer first? My god, this trailer did not care. It's really bad if you had waited 15 years to finally play this game and in 5 minutes you've had some massive story moments ruined for you because someone cut a trailer like this. Thank God I didn't watch it until after I completed the game. I had a feeling something was up with these later trailers, you know. Towards the end, those last few trailers were really giving the game away. No pun intended, they were really giving the game away. The first couple of trailers Square released were hitting the mark perfectly. I was even crying at them. They were brilliant. I was being reintroduced to the world and getting reveals on some central characters, and all of that was handled superbly. Those first few trailers whet my appetite just enough to hype me up good and proper, but then one of the trailers showed this brand new boss fight with Genova, and I thought that was too much. I would have appreciated seeing that in-game first instead of in a trailer. After that trailer, I refused to watch anymore. I didn't watch the final trailer and I feel like I dodged the bullet in doing so. Barrett getting shanked, Zack turning up, all those moments would have been ruined for me had I watched this trailer before playing the game. Square should have had a little more restraint when marketing this. You know, I had to mute the official FF7 Remake Twitter account because they were showing off Rufus's character render a week before release. Throughout the entire promotional strategy of this game, they hadn't shown Rufus once because he's essentially an endgame boss, okay? And then a week before the game releases, they casually throw out his character render in an image on Twitter. Imagine having to mute an official account because they're promoting something a little too much, you know? To the point they are now actively spoiling it for you. Hopefully promotion for Remake Part 2 won't be as gung-ho balls to the wall. I love you, Square, but your ass need to chill a little next time, yeah? Bloody hell. Whew! And there we have it. There's all my criticisms for FF7 Remake. I told you these were going to be a weird bunch of nitpicks and rants, and I'm not really expecting you to agree with any of this stuff. Like, this is just the sort of thing that irks me. I'm a lover for a strong storyline, which is what FF7 has, but it boils my blood when you get one or two random cutscenes that screw with the flow of this otherwise superbly paced story. That Eligor fight and Wedge being in the Shinra building, just nah, those moments pissed me off, but as I said, that's just me, and these are just my own complaints. Honestly, you know, I feel kind of dirty now, you know that? I feel like I need a shower. But yeah, aside from all of this, I'd like to send a massive shout out to you and yours for supporting me and keeping things moving slowly. Much love to all the regulars, you lot are hugely appreciated. I've been DiGi Valentine, thank you for your time, take care, and hopefully I'll see you all again real soon.